not sure. We sit there. We'll move people around.
Are we okay, Walter? I call to order the City of Riviera Beach CRA Board of Commissioners and Town of Lake Park. This meeting is on Wednesday, December 9th, and the time is 6:03. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner McCoy?
Here.
Commissioner Lanier?
Shirley? I know she's here. Go ahead.
Commissioner Miller Anderson?
Present.
Vice Chair Lawson?
Here.
Chair Botel?
Here.
Also present, Jonathan Evans, Executive Director, Michael Hago, General Counsel, Tamara Sagan, CRA Clerk. And for Lake Park, Mayor Michael O'Rourke,
Present.
Commissioner Aaron Flaherty, Vice Mayor Kimberly Glass Castro.
Here.
Commissioner John Linden,
Here.
Commissioner Roger Machad,
Here.
John D'Agostino, City Manager.
Present.
Madam Clerk, is that it?
I believe that's all. Did I miss anybody on the Lake Park side?
Thank you. We'll have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mayor O'Rourke. Mr. City Manager, you're recognized.
Can't hear him.
Madam Chair, members of the CRA Board of Commissioners, and our distinguished guests from the town of Lake Park, welcome to the beautiful event center here in Riviera Beach. And we're certainly delighted to be discussing economic development opportunities for both our communities. First and foremost, I'd like to introduce the staff that will be making the presentations on behalf of the city, and then turn it over to my colleague, Mr. D'Agostino, Town Manager for the Town of Lake Park, to introduce staff that will be making presentations on behalf of the Town of Lake Park. We have Scott Evans, our Planning and Development Director for the CRA, and then our Development Services Director, Clarence Sermons, that will be making our presentations. Manager D'Agostino.
Thank you, Manager Evans. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and certainly I know the Commission does as well. We're very proud of our little town, and tonight making our presentation of the vision for the town of Lake Park for the US 1 corridor is Nadia Di Tommaso, our Community Development Director.
Thank you. Just to provide a little bit of context with regards to why we're here today, is the manager and I over some time have talked about opportunities between both our communities. And we know that economic development is something that is a catalyst to additional ad valorem revenue for our communities. And what's good for Riviera Beach is good for the town of Lake Park, and what's good for Lake Park is good for the city of Riviera Beach. And so we wanted to put together a workshop or a discussion with the elected bodies to create some synergy and uniformity with regards to our development patterns within our Blue Heron and Broadway corridor. We know that economic development is happening. As you see, there's $6 billion worth of economic investments that's occurring in the communities of West Palm Beach as well as Palm Beach Gardens. And we know that we are next on the horizon for economic development. And we know that there's some things and some challenges that lie ahead with regards to making sure that we allow for the appropriate densities and intensities that we look to maximize the potential redevelopment opportunities in our community, and how do we create a sense of place or a sense of destination. And you'll hear later on today about a project, Nautilus 220, that Lake Park and their community has done just that. And we believe that there is some opportunity to create synergy and capture that lightning in a bottle to be able to create for the opportunities, growth, wealth, development, and creating a place that our residents can truly live, work, and play. We know that a lot of our residents have expressed some concerns with respect to dining establishments, shopping, entertainment, and the like, and we know that we have one chance to get this right. We are tasked with looking at things from zoning to land use regulations to policies and procedures that are archaic in some cases and need to be revised. And we're hopeful that by this discussion and by this joint meeting that we can all collectively learn from one another and really set the course to move us forward. And so we're excited about this opportunity and possibility and looking forward for future opportunities to have discussions with the town of Lake Park as well as other municipalities, because we have what a lot of other communities wish they had. And the board has heard me say many times, the city of West Palm Beach doesn't have a beach, and we do. And so we certainly have opportunities and natural resources that are second to none and world class. And certainly we want to maximize the opportunity and make sure we do it that's economically feasible, sustainable, and environmentally conscious, because we know we borrow the environment that we're in today from future generations. And so we have to be conscientious as we plan for the future. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the town manager, Mr. D'Agostino, to talk about the vision for Lake Park and begin their presentation.
Thank you very much, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight representing the town of Lake Park. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened way back in 2007, before I was here, and certainly I think, Jonathan, before you were where you are. In the town of Lake Park, they moved forward with a plan, a mixed-use plan. And that plan lay dormant for many, many years. And the reason why that plan lay dormant was that it wasn't attracting investment from the outside. It was not attracting developers to come in and invest the money that needed to be invested in order to move this community along in the town of Lake Park. And the missing link was density development. And we're going to go through a number of slides. We're going to talk a little bit about the vision for the US 1 corridor. I'm going to allow Nadia Di Tommaso to jump right in and begin that process. And I'll interject here and there where I think we could either provide some additional information or salient points that would, certainly help establish a clear-cut vision as to why we did what we did, the reason for it. And I do have to recognize the commission. When the public entity, in this case the Board of Commissioners, or the Board of Commissions in town of Lake Park, decided that this was an opportunity for us to move forward, it required them, over a period of time, to make some very, very important decisions, some of which at the time may not necessarily have been politically the correct decision based on initial feedback that we were getting from residents who were basically against the height issue. And over time, and through a number of outreach meetings and a number of individual stakeholder meetings, we were able, in concert with the commission, to be able to move forward with this particular vision. What I will say that I think is extremely important is that none of this would have been possible without the leadership of the mayor, the vice mayor, and the commission members taking hold of this vision, believing in the vision, and then making the decisions necessary to implement the vision that you'll hear tonight. So if there's anything that I can leave you with in regards to decisions, sometimes they're, in the public arena, they're not always the easiest decisions to make. But when you make those decisions in the best interests of the town or in the city of Riviera Beach, you are doing the work that your constituents elected you to do, is to make those decisions. You have the information, you have the ability, you have everything that you need to make the most informed decision possible. And at the end of the day, that is a responsibility of our elected officials. And I have to say that the Town Commission and the Town of Lake Park established a significant leadership role in this process. And we wouldn't be here today talking about this particular project if it wasn't for the 5-member board of Lake Park Town Commissioners. So, Nadia?
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you to the Riviera Beach staff and the City Council for inviting us here. This is indeed, just to echo the town manager's words, this is indeed one of the largest, most substantive types of initiative that the town took on that really created a vision, not only for today, but for the Federal Highway Corridor in the future that really leads the way to the town's future growth altogether. So what I will do this evening is I will touch briefly on why we took on this initiative, how we did it, who was involved, and where we are present day. So I will quickly move to the next slide. And this slide briefly touches on the general location of the Federal Highway Corridor as it relates to our Federal Highway Mixed-Use District. It stretches immediately adjacent to Riviera Beach on Silver Beach through Palmetto Drive on the north end, and from west to east, it is bordered by 2nd Street in Lake Park, and it ends along the west side of Lakeshore Drive. This particular regulating plan is one of 5 regulating plans that was adopted as part of this initiative, and the reason it was selected for this particular slide to identify the location is because it has some very important information. The information that it reflects is one of the main elements of our land development regulations that allow for a transitional approach to intensity. And I'll touch on that in just a little bit. But the reason why this regulating plan is very important is because this initiative primarily focused on not only bringing in and attracting developers for mixed-use development that would allow for more intense and dense type of development, but also to provide for a plan that's respective and compatible of the surrounding area. A plan that keeps in mind that we do have a single-family core area. We also have a lower intensity commercial area that borders the town that we must preserve. So this plan identifies the transitional approach to height that was adopted as part of the land development regulations. We do have 4 additional regulating plans that are not reflected here. Of course, this presentation just scratches the surface of what the full land development regulations represent. But again, this is one of our most important. The next slide touches on the why. So why did we take on this initiative? And it was touched on by both the city manager in Riviera Beach and the town manager in Lake Park already. It was important for us to, 1, diversify our tax base, bring in some economic development, but also attract some additional amenities and services to the town that would not only create this intense and dense type of redevelopment along the corridor, but improve the services to the entire community. So this particular plan for the US 1 corridor does provide a sense of place. It's quite different from our development pattern that the town was used to, but it creates a sense of place because it is respective of the surrounding area, and it creates land development regulations that allow for specific types of uses that are allowed, in various areas throughout the corridor. It allows for a height transition plan. It allows for greenways and open space areas as requirements, of course, depending on where you are within the corridor. It provides for streetscape improvement plans that identify different types of pedestrian amenities and bicycle amenities that would not only be enjoyed by the development sites themselves, but also by the community as a whole. And it provides for a plethora of other types of, amenities and services that the entire Lake Park community would be able to take advantage of. Provide physical and functional integration from the west side of Federal Highway to Lakeshore Drive. So again, this touches on the transitional approach that was extremely important as part of the adoption of this plan. Enhance pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular accessibility and connectivity. Establish an overall development pattern that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods and enhances the character of the community. So again, we needed to respect and understand the layout that had been in existence for a very long time in the town of Lake Park, which consisted of a single-family area along with lower-intensity commercial areas. Encourage preservation of potentially historic resources. We had and still have some properties within the study area that do have historic significance, so we needed to take that into account. And in our land development regulations, we provide for a transfer of development right scenario and provisions that would allow for each property to take advantage of the development options that the land development regulations provide, but also preserve the historic properties by allowing them to transfer those rights to other properties for redevelopment. Enhance the existing public spaces, waterfront, and marina. So we were just lucky by nature. We were lucky that our US 1 corridor already had a public marina, already has 2 large open spaces, parks, Kelsey Park, Lakeshore Park. We already have some of these services that some other corridors may have to integrate in order to create for that comprehensive approach to mixed use. Diversify the town's tax base in order to better position the town in the future in its ability to provide services to its residents. Of course, from an economic development perspective, this was extremely important. We needed to look at ways in which we could attract developers to bring in high-valued projects that would, of course, allow for this diversification to happen, so that in turn, down the line and in the future, we could enhance and provide additional services to the Lake Park community. Provide developers with a reason and a mechanism to invest in Lake Park with proposed regulations that match market conditions and enhance feasibility of development. Of course, this lends itself to the reason why we took on this initiative, which the town manager touched on, whereby the original vision was to have mixed use, but the land development regulations didn't quite allow for a developer to propose a viable development that would allow for that return of investment that they would need.
Nadia, if I could just
Yes.
interject here. When we talk about the tax base in the town of Lake Park, you need to understand that our total tax base revenue from ad valorem taxes is about $3.2 million. We have an $8 million operating budget. We have a $12 million total budget, which includes enterprise fund accounts when you calculate all of our operating budget together. This particular site, prior to the development, was contributing approximately $86,000 to our tax base in the town of Lake Park. With this density development project, those same 5 parcels combined together will generate, on an estimated value of $340 million, will generate approximately $1.7 million in additional tax revenue to the town without raising the ad valorem tax rate at all. We think that that's extremely important when we talk about diversifying our tax base. We were very heavily reliant, even though we had a significant industrial park area, we were heavily reliant on the property tax base. And as you know, in 2007, when the market hit, values decreased, people filed bankruptcy on their homes or they lost their homes. It hit the town of Lake Park disproportionately hard. And as a result of that, diversification of our tax base became a very important factor for a financial survivability perspective for us. So, sorry.
No, thank you, thank you.
Madam Chair,
You're recognized,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
McCoy.
so, Manager,
Mr. D'Agostino.
Mr. D'Agostino, can you repeat those numbers back? Because you went very fast and they seem
I'm sorry.
pretty significant, and I want to make sure I capture those.
Thank you.
The 5 parcels that, prior to the development moving forward, those 5 parcels contributed $86,000 to $89,000 a year in property tax revenue, ad valorem tax revenue. When this project is completed, the high-end aspect that Nadia was talking about, high-end development aspect, the developer is investing $180 million that will have a value, once occupied, of approximately $340 million. That $340 million will yield an additional $1.7 million in additional tax revenue to the town from that one project alone.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. McCoy.
So, Honorable Manager, the pro forma that you're speaking of, is this something that you guys work with who your developer is to come up with this, or is this something independent, or is this something that was done by the city? So, like, these projections and pro forma numbers, speaking of your projected ad valorem revenues, and even what the investment is, and also the projected value, where does those numbers come?
Those numbers, I believe, and Nadia can speak to it more directly.
Thank you.
We met with the property appraiser's office, gave them, the design and the build-out of what we were, looking at building, what the total cost of construction was going to be, and asked them to help us figure what the potential tax revenue would be based on the current tax rate that we have.
Madam Chair,
You're recognized.
lastly, and before we get too far, have you specifically shared with the body what those 5 parcels you're speaking of? Are they the ones at the corner of Silver Beach and US 1, just on the north side?
No, they are the ones closest to, the 5 parcels were privately held. They were assembled by the developer to the tune of approximately $10 million when it was all said and done. But they're to the north of the parcel that you are referencing. It includes the old boats, South Florida Yacht Boat Company, and those parcels. It was a residential parcel and 2 other commercial properties. So when you put the 5 parcels together, that's what I'm referring to.
Go ahead.
Follow up, Madam Chair. So this is just the numbers off of information that you shared with from the developer with the property appraiser's office.
I believe so. Nadia, can you
Yes,
highlight that?
this is information that the developer did most of the homework for these numbers when they presented their plan to the town, which I do have to emphasize was after the development and adoption of our land development regulations. So this did come to us after we created the plan that we did. They brought us these numbers and did identify that the project would have a value of $180 million. And the reason they did that, and I have another slide, but I'll touch on it right now since we're having this discussion, is the reason they did that is our land development regulations require a public improvement contribution for the additional height that they were requesting in their project. And that public improvement contribution is 1% of the project value. So the 180 million is the project value, and they contributed 2 days after approval of their site plan, $1.8 million to the town that we now have created a fund for future public improvements within the study area. So that is where that particular number has come from. And the value after construction, which of course is still subject to change, it is approximately the value that the town manager indicated that the developer provided in the $340 million range.
Mr. McCoy.
Thank you. Follow-up, Madam Chair. So, Ms. Tomaso, the last bullet point you have up there speaks of the match market conditions. Is this something that you relied on the developer to determine what the marketing conditions were? Was there a marketing, I guess, was there a study of the market, or how exactly do we arrive at that's what the market demands? So
That's an excellent question. In 2 slides forward from this one, I do touch on the process. In the beginning of the process, we actually conducted an existing site analysis market study for the study area that identified the need for not only mixed use, but more specifically for residential units within this area.
Follow-up. You said when we conducted a market study, meaning the town of Lake Park?
We did, through our consultant, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nadia.
Okay.
Sorry.
On the next slide, I touch on the who and the how. Who was involved in this initiative and why, and what was their importance, and how was this accomplished? How was this process made to be all-inclusive? The key stakeholders, which is similar to some other initiatives that we do take on, include the Lake Park community. So of course the residents, the businesses, the property owners, everyone involved in the day-to-day of the town. The Lake Park Planning and Zoning Board, the local planning agency, the Lake Park Town Commission, and Lake Park staff and the consultant who was involved in this process. I know this was stressed on earlier, and I will not only say it now, but I'll probably touch on it a little later on, how important it was to make sure that this process was all-inclusive from start to end, and how important it was to have the support that we did from the town commission from the very beginning when we were putting all our pieces together and having our public workshops to the very end through today when we're in the implementation stage of working with a developer to realize this plan for the very first time. So how the process was made to be all-inclusive. We had individual stakeholder meetings. We had a general public kickoff meeting. We utilized all of the public noticing that we could and had available to us, which included our website, our social media accounts, our local Channel 18. We conducted direct mail to all owners within the study area multiple times, including an extension of the study area as well through direct mail. We created a special website for this initiative specifically with special banners that were installed along the Federal Highway corridor. A sample of the banner is actually on the top right of the slide. We held individual public meetings for the west and east sides of the corridor, and this was important because there were specific provisions and regulations that we saw were needed for the west side that were different from the ones that were needed along the east side. Acceptance of public comments throughout the entire process. Again, this was extremely important. We involved the public from start to finish. We not only took in their comments, we made sure that they were a part of the record. We responded to all questions, all concerns in a timely manner. Several public hearings for additional commenting, which is natural to the process. Of course, we had our typical public hearings, the Planning and Zoning Board, the local planning agency, the Town Commission, which allowed for additional public comments as well. Emphasis on the role of the public. So in addition to what I've already mentioned, the public really did provide key input on the needs and desires of the community. Why? Because the business community has businesses in the community. They were able to provide that type of input. The residents who were living in the single-family areas or even the multifamily areas, they were able to provide input as it related to the types of development patterns that they saw would be most compatible to their existing neighborhoods. Site-specific strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, this was stressed on the entire process. And inside information on town culture and history. We touched on these as well. One, because the town does have a long history. We do have quite a bit of culture. We have different different areas of the town that are redeveloping in different ways. So we, of course, wanted to take that into account as we work through the initiative. Project steps. As the town manager indicated earlier, the vision for mixed use started a long time ago. However, the code, the land development regulations, the zoning code, and the comprehensive plan weren't set up in a way that would ever attract any type of viable mixed use development. So the process we took on was a 13-month process. We did work with a consultant from April 2017 through May 2018. And it included the following steps. The very first step, we performed an existing conditions data and parcel analysis market study to identify, is mixed use appropriate for this area? And if it is, what type of density does the market currently call for in this general area? It was clear in this study, several points were made in the study, but one of the elements that was very clear was that there was a potential for over 3,000 residential units, not only in the immediate Lake Park area, but in the general area. And this element was extremely important because this led to the development of our comprehensive plan that, of course, allows for the density through a basket of rights approach, which allows for a basket to be created of over 3,000 residential units. And as developers come in for site plan approval, they are able to take from that basket. So that is how we essentially structured our comprehensive plan. Secondly, public involvement, stakeholder interviews and public
Chair.
meetings, which I've touched on already. Yes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, you recognize Mr. McCoy.
Thank you. So, Ms. Tomaso, please forgive me. I just want to make sure I understood. You said you conducted a market analysis, but that's how you created your comprehensive plan. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, this analysis that was created identified a need for an additional 3,000 plus units in the general area.
Follow up, Madam Chair. So they weren't specific to just Lake Park, because I thought you just said 3,000 units.
Not just Lake Park, but also in the surrounding areas.
Okay, so the market analysis, you pointed out existing conditions, data, parcel analysis. Did it speak to any of the AMI or the type of units and, what the going rate would be?
It didn't speak to the going rate of the units, but it did speak to market rate units. It did speak to that.
Okay, but your study concluded that market rate units were viable based on the study you conducted, and it was not just encompassing Lake Park, but surrounding community.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
I'm only asking the very details because this is something that we've kind of seen before, and I want to make sure that I can get the fullness of exactly what the scope was and what your results was and what you can make an analysis to kind of move forward with these projects. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I'd like to follow up on that, and thank you, Mr. McCoy. Those are really important questions. I'm sure, given that we're your best neighbors, you'd be very interested in sharing that market analysis with us, wouldn't you, Mr. D'Agostino?
That's a public record.
Thank you
and
very
we
much.
certainly have no problem sharing it. I'll send it over to my
Mr.
counterpart,
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Evans, and you can take it from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second step, which has been discussed already, public involvement, stakeholder interviews, and public meetings. Then this led to the draft comprehensive plan amendments, of course, setting the policies for redevelopment, setting the maximum non-residential square footages, the maximum density through the basket of rights approach for density. So again, being a basket that developers on a first-come, first-served basis would be able to take from of over 3,000 residential units. Draft zoning amendments. So these essentially are our land development regulations that allow for all of the zoning provisions related to permitted uses, landscaping requirements, different types of building typologies, depending on where you are within the corridor, because again, keeping in mind that, you know, the west side is very different than the east side of the corridor as it relates to the intensity, the potential intensity of development that could be incorporated. The streetscape improvement plans, the public improvements element that I touched on a little earlier, related to, you know, the possibility for a developer to get some additional height in exchange for some additional public improvements. So all of this culminated into the land development regulations that were eventually adopted by the Town Commission. An additional public involvement element, just by nature, of course, were those public meetings that allowed for the review and the adoption of these land development regulations and comprehensive plan amendments, the public hearings. And then at the very end of the process, after everything was adopted, both the comprehensive plan and the zoning component, the land development regulations, we did have another component that was in the contract for the consultant, and this was to have a marketing event that was held at our marina to just promote the new plan that we then had in place. This was highly attended. It was held at the marina. I would say we probably had close to 100 people attend that event. It was a mixture of the Lake Park community, as well as developers that came from, you know, as far south as Miami, and maybe as far north as, I think we had someone there from Jupiter. And we also held trolley tours. We created special marketing materials with the Vision Lake Park information on flash drive for distribution. So we thought that this was an excellent step at the very end of the process to promote the work that we had done and everything that had been adopted. And then following this, you know, from then to now, we remained flexible and adaptable. This was extremely important and continues to be, because, you know, once the process is completed, there's always room for improvement. We, of course, want to create the best plan that we could at the time, but, you know, once you get a site plan application or a developer come through, there are always little, you know, little sections of the provisions or the regulations that may need to be modified, and this is just natural and normal to the process. And we went through 2 of those changes, you know, from adoption to now, because of the plan that we were reviewing from a particular developer. So again, adaptability and flexibility is key, and luckily we keep having the support of the administration and the Lake Park Commission in order to do that. So again, I can't stress how important that has been throughout the entire process. The next slide will now touch on investment opportunities for developers. So I explained why. Why do we take this on? And one of those points was to attract development that would diversify our tax base. So from a developer standpoint, you know, they're asking themselves, why should I invest in Lake Park? So these were the key factors that we kept in mind throughout the entire process. Proposed land development regulations that will match market conditions and enhance the feasibility of private development in the area. It was extremely important, as has been mentioned a couple of times already, to create land development regulations that allow for mixed-use development and allow for a developer to get a return on their investment. Strong market potential for commercial and residential units with real estate value and opportunity. Ability to create a mixed-use environment that is livable, walkable, and enhances quality of life. Mixed use in and of itself does all of these things. It creates a development area that brings in a variety of uses, mostly commercial and residential. With those uses, it creates additional pedestrian connections, additional pedestrian amenities, brings in additional services. In our case, and I'll touch on the Nautilus project, additional amenities and services that cater and enhance our surrounding marina area. So mixed use is a wonderful tool to, if done right, to create this livable, walkable, and enhanced quality of life scenario. Existing waterfront location with marina and boat launch facilities. Again, we're just very fortunate to have that within the study area. A large waterfront public park, which of course we have. We have Kelsey Park, we have Lakeshore Park. Corridors anchored by a unique and historic downtown. Federal highway improvements are a planning priority. This is important because this does tie into the streetscape improvement element that we incorporated in our land development regulations and the ongoing discussions that we are having with FDOT and the TPA to realize these streetscape improvements and also tie them to some of our our newer initiatives, such as our green infrastructure initiative, which I know is not the topic for this evening, but this plan allows us to not only realize the improvements that we had envisioned as part of the plan, but also tie in the additional projects and initiatives that we may have going town-wide as well. Located on a major north-south commercial corridor east of I-95, just by virtue of its location. Great open and public spaces such as Kelsey Park, Lake Park Harbor Marina, and downtown. And most importantly, it's at the end, but it's the most important element, supportive town leadership with a desire for mixed-use development. The support of our administration, the support of our Lake Park Commission, and the general support of our Lake Park community, because we created a process that was all-inclusive, and because we created a process that allowed for the open discussion and just timely response to comments and questions. And then finally, implementation
Mr.
after...
Can I ask a question? I see our
Yes.
chairperson. Mr.
Councilman McCoy, go ahead.
So, and actually, I was wanting to ask a question about the last slide about investment opportunities for developers. Are we able to go back that one slide? So, I do see that and I appreciate that. And those are really general in terms, and I know I work in another career with the TPA and also with FDOT and doing some work specifically. As ironic is that I was very much instrumental working in a legislative role doing some of the FDOT projects from Silver Beach South down to the overpass at the port. And I guess I was just curious. So all of these proposed ideas of why a developer should want to come to the town of Lake Park, have you spoken to or have you have a plan to introduce, is there some incentives that's provided to these developers as far as, is there any kind of return of tax payments, any kind of infrastructure improvements? What exactly would want a developer to come to that? Is there any incentives offered by the town?
The biggest incentive that we were offering through the adoption of this plan was the ability to create density. And to a developer, and what we heard from developers is that was one of the largest incentives that would allow for a large return on their investment. So yes, the plan does require the developer to incorporate, the necessary streetscape improvements, pedestrian improvements, street connectivity elements, so on and so forth. But it also gives them the ability to have height, the additional non-residential square footage that they need, and the ability to incorporate a much higher density that would have previously been allowed. So for the example of Nautilus 220, which of course is the project that we currently have on the horizon, is they are proposing and will be building 332 residential units on a roughly 2-acre site. Previously, before the land development regulations were adopted, they were able to build 1 story of commercial and 1 story of residential.
And I appreciate that, Ms. Tomaso, and that's exactly what I was trying to get at. So obviously, this is not an alienatory deal. This is what we have, live with it. So obviously, there's a conversation as to what their proposal is, as to what they want to do. And you guys go back to your table and figure out, how do we make 2 acres work to make this developer projects work? Obviously, there should be a conversation, and I would defer to our TPA representative, because I don't know exactly who's Lake Park, but obviously this is a conversation for TPA and also FDOT, because if you're going to have that increased density, then obviously there should be some conversations with, Department of Transportation as far as US 1 and the federal highways. But I'm just more concerned with, this is just something that we have to actually sit down at a table when we have these conversations with developers about what makes it work for your proposal to come into Riviera Beach, as opposed to saying, this is the deal. We have to make sure that we have a open dialogue to make sure that it works, because I don't see in Nautilus, if I'm not mistaken, I think the primary developers is doing something actually in Emerald. Am I right? Isn't that the same developer?
I don't think so, no.
No?
No, the Amherst is Dilip Barrett, and this is not Dilip's project.
It's not?
No.
I thought it was.
Is it,
but-
John?
I'm sorry, I
The
didn't.
Amherst is a project by Dilip Barrett. This is not a the Nautilus is not a project by Dilip.
No.
No.
Okay. I don't know why I had that, but I thought it was, but, okay. Okay, so there's obviously an open dialogue about what needs to work in order for the developer, and obviously there is some compromise as to what it takes and what the town is willing to change their zoning code and the height to accommodate that. Because you said they're going from 1 story, now being allowed to do 338 units?
They are proposing 332 residential units. Their project has 23 stories, 5 stories of which are parking levels. And again, when we worked through the land development regulations, we were not working with developers at the time. We looked at the maximums. We looked at, of course, our conditions analysis, our market study. We looked at the location of the various parcels throughout the corridor, what types of, intensities would be appropriate for the surrounding areas, depending on where you were along the corridor. We workshopped it with the community, and we created maximums, which seem to work, at least for the Nautilus project, and they are, of course, proposing their project within our most intense block area that was created in the land development regulations.
Thank you, Ms. Tomaso.
Madam Chair?
You recognize Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, ma'am. Madam Director, the consultant, what is the name of the consultant you worked with over that year and a half period?
Redevelopment Management Associates, RMA.
RMA? Okay. And a follow-up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
The public investment, looking at some of the amenities that the town currently has, the park that you have, the public dock, marina, were there any additional investments into the town at the time, whether it was i.e. roads, park improvements, anything that the town did to assist with the attraction of some of the developers that you're bringing in?
If I may, a minute. One of the concerns that we had relative to this type of project coming into this area was an excessive amount of flooding that we had. It occurs on a regular basis, particularly during, high tide, king tides, water's backing up. It's not a desirable amount. If I'm a developer and I'm going to spend $180 million, I'm not going to invest that $180 million on a street that floods on a regular, consistent basis. So one of the things that we needed to work on as a town was how to eliminate the flooding and the coastal sea level rise and everything else that's going on, and keep those streets clear without water. And we were fortunate because we ended up with a $3.5 million grant from FEMA and $2 million that we're proposing to put in under our 1-cent sales tax for infrastructure improvements to do a complete overhaul of the drainage project in the town of Lake Park. In that particular area, we're putting in bioswale areas, pumping station. We're going to have a significant number of, we're going to reduce the number of outflows, and we're going to increase the size of those the few that we're going to have. We're going to have 4 outflows in this plan with 72-inch piping that will be treated before it's discharged into the intercoastal through the bioswale system that we have. And it's a great project from the standpoint of urban development, because right now, unless you have a large enough area to put a retention pond, the next best approach would be these bioswales, which we're putting in throughout the entire town, because those bioswales will clean that water. The roots of the trees and plants and shrub and bushes that are going to be in those bioswales are going to filter that water, and by the time it discharges to the intercoastal, it will be significantly cleaner. And that's the green infrastructure that was referenced briefly. That's important, I think, for any project where you don't have the land to put in these retention ponds. And so once we were able to clear that up, and actually we're signing a contract for $4.7 million to actually do the work. It's going to be done by Foster Marine. The contract will be signed on the 16th, and that project is an 11-month project. So it will coincide to a degree with the construction project for the actual development.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
If I may, I just wanted to add one other item here. These 332 residential units have an average square footage of approximately 1,700 square feet. There will be some units that are going to be flexed enough where people can buy an entire floor. The price point is set at $550 for the less desirable units per square foot to $800 to $850. Based on the current conditions, the fact that there's 1,000 people a day moving into Florida as a result, indirectly or otherwise, of the pandemic, we think that the actual price point is going to increase as the units begin to sell out.
Could you repeat that price per square foot? That was 550 to 800?
800, yeah, 550 to 800 square
Price
foot.
per square foot. Thank
So
you.
the average low end of this acquisition for a 1,700 plus square foot condo will be about $900,000.
Thank you. I will be quick in my next 2 slides. Much of the information has already been discussed. So of course, our success story that is still ongoing is the Nautilus 220 project. It was originally named Nautilus 211. It is now Nautilus 220. It is proposing the 332 units we discussed, 13,000 square feet of office, 8,058 square feet of retail, 14,550 square feet of waterfront restaurant space. Currently, they are proposing to divide that 14,000 into two waterfront restaurants that do face our marina and our waterfront area. The site plan application, which was quite impressive, was submitted within 3 months of plan adoption. Oftentimes we adopt plans and we don't really realize them or have projects that are submitted to make them a reality until much later. Well, this developer was paying attention to what we were doing and quickly after adoption submitted their site plan application, which was reviewed and approved by our town commission within 5 months. And again, this was our largest project that Lake Park has ever seen and ever reviewed in terms of commercial and residential. So present day, we did touch on these figures already. Nautilus 220 has already contributed $1.8 million in public improvement dollars to the town. They have also invested, which we have not touched on yet, an additional $1.5 million in a barge and model unit concept that is housed at our Lake Park Harbor Marina. We do have a lease agreement with them, so we are generating additional revenue for this. They intend on having the barge and model unit throughout the duration of construction. They, of course, have applied for and received the site plan approval that they've needed, along with additional amendments to the code as we were going through the process. They've also since applied for and received and have demolished buildings within the project area. They've cleared the site to get it ready for future construction. They do plan on submitting for their master permit for construction in early 2021 with possible vertical construction to begin in the spring of 21. An additional element that of course we're working on, which we've discussed, is the US 1 Streetscape Improvement Plan. That is not only part of our land development regulations, but that is another initiative that really moved forward because we adopted the land development regulations for the Federal Highway Corridor surrounding area park improvements. This does go along with some of the discussions that the town manager just had as it relates to the types of incentives. So once we adopted this plan, we had a lot of interest from the private sector to work with the town on some additional park improvements to further enhance the Nautilus project and the additional projects that may come our way in the future. There has been interest in mixed-use development, of course, immediately around our park areas as well. Public-private P3 partnership for marina redevelopment. This is another initiative that we're currently working on because we adopted a federal highway mixed-use plan with the regulations that we have. We have a consultant who is working through a P3 process to redevelop our marina parking areas and redevelop our existing marina area so as to make it a more resort-style marina with additional amenities and services in partnership with the private sector. This does complete my presentation. Of course, I am available for any additional questions, and I thank you once again for your time, for inviting us, and for having us here to explain what we believe to be a very important and successful initiative that the town of Lake Park has taken on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair and members of the board and our guest, certainly we know that economic development opportunities are on the horizon for the city of Riviera Beach. We have entertained and discussed multiple opportunities within the US 1 corridor. There's not a week that goes by that a developer does not talk about opportunities to develop in our community and some of the challenges associated with the development, whether it's the densities and intensities, whether it's with regards to some of the restrictions that are in our code, and some of the zoning requirements for vertical construction to commence. We know that there is a significant need in the community for housing, as well as creating for business development to create a sense of community and placemaking. And you've just seen how this particular project in Lake Park is going to be, in essence, a game changer. And we believe that there is multiple opportunities here in the city of Riviera Beach to beautify, to spruce up, and improve our Broadway corridor. I've asked staff to take a look at our existing policies and procedures and look at our existing CRA plan and discuss with the board some of the existing elements contained in the plan and then a pathway forward. We know that we're embarking upon the review of our CRA plan, but you know there's additional conversations that we need to have with respect to how can we do things that entice private sector growth and development. We know that no elected body wants to increase taxes, and the only way to see ad valorem taxes increase in our community is to spur economic development and growth and to look at things differently through a different lens. And we know that this process for the town of Lake Park was probably getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think effectively for us to move in that direction, it will require us to look at things that traditionally have been non-starters for us. But we know that with discussions and conversations and dialogue with the elected body and the community and creating for wealth and participation for our local residents, that we can create a sense of place that rivals some of the best places in the country and especially here in South Florida. So as we get into the discussion with the Broadway corridor, if we can get the presentation up. And we can go right to the second slide, and then I will turn it over to. So when we did have this discussion, the town manager and I, we talked about opportunities to partner up to create uniformity and consistency, to discuss opportunities for streetscape, landscape. You heard the innovative concept with regards to bioswales and how that may be a mechanism for us to look to address some of the stormwater runoff and treat some of the water before it makes its way into the Lake Worth Lagoon or into the aquifer. So we're looking at all different concepts from all different communities on ways to be a beacon that the private sector looks to do business with. We brought in additional staff, we've changed some of our processes, and we're looking to do things that rival some of the best economic development communities in the country. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Director Scott Evans from the CRA, our planning director.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Good evening, Town of Lake Park, City of Riviera Beach Commission and staff. Tonight we're going to go over some of the existing conditions we have in the Broadway corridor and talk about some of the opportunities that we have in looking towards adopting an updated vision similar to the process that you've now gone through. I just have a couple of pictures up here that I just put there to try and get our commission energized about trying to seek a new vision and looking around at the different types of really nice downtowns that exist. One of those shots is from West Palm Beach. Obviously, they've done a tremendous job of developing their downtown. The existing conditions in Riviera Beach along the Broadway corridor, it's primarily made up of small properties. They're mostly built, and there's a wide variety of ownership. And our CRA plan, as it currently exists, promotes incremental redevelopment, so it does allow properties to go forward if they don't have the entire block. And it does allow for improvement of enhancement and improvements to existing structures. In order to promote larger scale development in Riviera Beach, we really need to incentivize the creation of larger development blocks. And for projects to achieve greater scale and density, they need to have enough property in order to accommodate the parking, open space, and large types of buildings that we're looking for. So a lot of the development properties, developable properties along the corridor need to be combined with other ones in order to achieve that kind of scale. The history of the land use and zoning and the current vision dates back all the way to 2009. When the city that's when we last updated our vision. And at that time, we changed all of our land use and zoning to mixed use. And so that was approved in 2011. And following that, unfortunately, we didn't get a lot of development that happened, but what we did get was that a lot of the properties, after we changed them to mixed use, changed hands and were sold to developers and investors. So that, following that process, that took about 2.5 years, and that was an entirely new CRA plan, followed by the next year we adopted new land use and zoning regulations that were related to that, and then finally in 2011, all the documents that we developed and brought through the public process were approved. And what we're proposing for our vision is to update all of those various documents in 1 year in an accelerated process. The CRA plan and its related land development regulations are based on new urbanism and traditional neighborhood development. In order to attest the effects of the new code at that time, or the existing code, what we did was we identified a lot of the properties within the corridor that were ideal for redevelopment, and that we could create larger blocks, and then we developed some concepts based on the new codes to sort of create a build-out plan, a potential build-out plan for what the corridor might look like in the future. When we first moved to mixed use, moving to mixed use really, it helps promote the creation of public space. We were attempting to implement more similar development patterns because a lot of Broadway had been developed with a lot of different types of projects. And there is some buildings that were built in accordance with traditional neighborhood development, but a lot of projects with large parking lots in the front that are not pedestrian-friendly spaces. So the model on the left is sort of the types of development that we had along the Broadway corridor. And so when we adopted the mixed-use zoning regulations, that was trying to achieve the type of development that's shown on the right, creating public spaces, integrating the buildings closely to the street, and trying to create an environment that's friendly to pedestrians. And this diagram is also from our existing mixed use, which shows the existing property development guidelines we have in place to create a downtown environment. It shows it in relation to the street. But we've not received any new scale projects following the adoption of our mixed use. And what we've gotten from the feedback from developers and talking to the development community is that the mixed use is right for the corridor, but we just don't have the density and the height limits that would allow them to redevelop those properties profitably in our current market. We're looking to update our current vision, building upon the old one, to try and create downtown along the Broadway corridor. The updated vision can build upon our existing platform, which is based on new urbanism, and this is adopted into our CRA plan. And of course, that's creating walkable blocks, improved pedestrian environments, enhanced sidewalks, and being able to provide housing and shopping in close proximity to each other, and incorporating public spaces right into the streetscapes. I'm showing this particular project, the one on the bottom, is showing a really great public space. This is a project in West Palm Beach where they have a mixed-use building, but they've incorporated public space into the sidewalk and along the roadway, which really helps create a very attractive and safe place to be. The more people and the more activity, of course, that you have on a street, the safer the environment becomes, especially the perception of safety, which is really something that we're trying to overcome. I want to show these two projects specifically. Above there, just samples of development, but the one on the left is actually a new proposed mixed-use project. It's primarily a housing project, and this was recently approved to go forward with a grant from the CRA. And this is developed to meet our existing zoning code. And it's got retail on the bottom and then approximately 100 units above, but it's low scale. And what we believe the new vision that we want to work towards is trying to find the right amount that we increase the density and intensity. And so the project on the right is a mixed-use project that was developed by a Miami CRA. And you can tell it's a much greater scale, but they've done a few things to try and keep it from overwhelming the street. One, they set back the main tower of the building so that it's still a human scale from the street level. And then they've also, but it's a mixed-use project, so they're providing retail, office on the bottom, and then the residential above. And there's a significant difference in the amount of tax revenue that can be generated if we can attract the type of development that's on the right also. And obviously the project on the left, we're very glad and hoping that it moves forward since it meets our mixed-use desire. But as we work through the new vision over the next year, we're going to have to try and identify how dense and how high is right for Riviera Beach. Another benefit, by bringing residents to live on the Broadway corridor, will also be helping to create a local market to support new ground floor office and retail that we'd like to attract. A lot of our spaces and existing buildings along Broadway have remained vacant. And so by adding more residents and people right in close proximity, we'll be able to create a small market to try and help lease out those retail spaces and neighborhood office on the bottom. As part of creating the new land development regulations and creating an update, we will study the existing blocks that are ideal for redevelopment. And the existing study we did previously really only looked at the south end of Broadway, but you can see where we've targeted some of the blocks, and it shows how they could be redeveloped under existing mixed use. So we would have to update this study and carry it forward all the way north to our border with Lake Park to try and project out how the new proposed code changes, how they could achieve new development. And of course, the city and CRA have, over the past year, assembled key blocks in this corridor and acquired some property, including in the marina, in order to try and get it ready for development. And of course, trying to assemble those smaller parcels so that we can get larger ones and develop them. The new urbanist principles that we propose to build upon really will provide more density, but what they stand for is the restoration of existing urban centers and redeveloping existing sites and redeveloping within downtown urban areas without completely removing everything that's already there. Of course, connecting the uses is an important aspect of that. A lot of development that's traditionally been done, of course, is very independent. It's not connected to the next unit over, and they're distinctly separated uses. And so this philosophy, of course, would try not only to connect our buildings to the street, but also to each other. So the process for Riviera Beach to update our vision, we have a few things that are underway. The various steps are, the CRA plan update is the first one that's already underway, and we've hired Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to assist us with an update in our CRA plan. And then that would be followed by developing amendments to implement that new vision into our land development code, into our comprehensive plan, and into our land development regulations. The city has also acquired several key sites that I'm going to go into later, that once we develop our new vision, then we can go forward and try and develop those sites as an example of what Broadway can become, and that will also help us attract new private development. And additionally, we'd like to add new incentives. A lot of projects that are of this scale have a lot of parking demand that have to be incorporated into parking structures, which of course is very costly. Parking structures per parking space often cost upwards of $25,000 each. And so we would be looking at bringing new development incentives to match our new vision. So if a developer comes in to try bring a project that meets the goals of the city council and the CRA board, then they might would be able to take advantage of those infrastructure or different grant programs. Specifically, the schedule that we're looking at, and rather than do all of these one after the other, we're proposing to try and develop them concurrently as possible. The proposed CRA plan, which is under development now, we're proposing a public workshop on what's envisioned for our new plan in January. And they're also working on a real estate market analysis of the CRA and the city. And so we were proposing to present that first to the CRA board, and that will help us set the standard of what kind of densities and developments and expectations we have for market units. So we'll also be very interested in looking at the one that Lake Park had completed previously. But that real estate market analysis will also help inform our new regulations and help us try and set the expectations for what we can attract in the future. The completely approving a CRA plan we'd do additional public workshops in April, and in the summer we would be looking to adopt that plan. In order to implement the plan and the new vision, of course, we have to amend our land development regulations. So we'd like to start developing those in April after we've gotten through the first few series of public workshops on the CRA plan. So we will, at that point, we'll have a general idea of where we're headed and what the board and residents' feedback and direction is for those items. So then we can start creating them so that in the summer, when we adopt our CRA plan, we'll be ready to adopt our new land development code and comprehensive plan amendments. And of course, the final adoption wouldn't be until the fall. Concurrently, we're also working on our public-private partnerships to try and develop all of the sites that we've acquired along the Broadway corridor. And the development incentives, we will also plan to bring those back to the board. The board looked at a couple iterations of them over the past year, so we'll be looking to bring them back to you for review and adoption in February and March to try and incentivize new developments to come to Riviera Beach.
So one of the things that we know is critical to the success of any endeavor such as this is the requirements to work with the public, and especially the elected officials, to get direction. So as descriptive, as prescriptive as the elected officials are, it provides staff with the framework in which to work with. Once we get the collective vision from the board, we look to move forward with stakeholder meetings, one-on-one interviews, presentations to civic organizations, community groups, to really get the support and create the synergy and educate and inform the community with regards to the vision for Riviera Beach. The board took stances last year to establish Riviera Beach 2030, and with that, it was looking to address everything in the community holistically, looking at improvements in infrastructure, looking at ways to create a sense of place and a sense of destination. And certainly I think it's important that we utilize that mechanism and the work that has been done associated with Riviera Beach 2030, a vision for the future, to really get the community excited. We had a workshop this past weekend where we talked about municipal facilities and that we can see anywhere between $200 to $300 million of public investment in municipal facilities, and that is inevitably going to lead itself to additional private sector opportunities. And so the challenge and the opportunity we have is to educate and inform and to really till the soil and fertilize it for what we believe to be the greatest 10 years of this city's history with regards to growth and economic development. We will create a robust webpage. We will really engage our residents in multiple forms and fashions, whether it's social media, face-to-face meetings, town halls, virtual town halls, mail-out campaigns, everything to get input and feedback so you all, the policymakers, can be well-equipped to be able to help us carry this forward. Obviously, there's going to be multiple reviews by the Planning and Zoning Board, the CRA Board, and the City Council, but certainly we need the vision and the direction and the excitement to be emulated from the board, and then ultimately staff will then work accordingly. So the more direction, the more perspective, the more things that you would like to see us accomplish, and hearing it from you and setting that roadmap, staff can then go ahead and execute. We have a very aggressive plan, and our intent is to move quickly, because I would hope that a year and some from now, we're having a conversation with the town of Lake Park, communicating about an economic development opportunity that is on the horizon here in Riviera Beach. And this meeting and the conversations that will come from this meeting is the catalyst that allowed for us to move forward in such a fashion. So we are certainly excited. We know that we're going to have to meet our residents where they are, but we will leave no stone unturned, and we will make sure that we do so in a way that educates, informs, and excites the community about the economic development opportunity and the participation in the economic development opportunities here in Riviera Beach. With that being said, I'm going to turn the presentation over to our Development Services Director, Mr. Clarence Sermons, to talk about our existing zoning and land use. Director Sermon.
Thank you. Good evening, all. Again, I am Clarence Sermons, Director of Development Services. And this evening I will get into more specifics as to what our current development regulations are in the city of Riviera Beach, and some options that we can look into and explore for creating the environment and the additional economic development that has been discussed previous to my segment of this presentation. If you are following along on paper, there are a couple slides that have been reordered, because I want to begin by starting with the zoning maps of the downtown corridor that we are. All right, the first slide here shows the Broadway corridor, which is where much of our focus related to creating additional density in Riviera Beach has been focused. This image in front of you shows the portion of Broadway north of Blue Heron. As far as zoning here, the main areas and parcels in question are the downtown general and downtown core areas, which are depicted by the purple hashed area as well as the red hashed area. Next slide, please. Thank you. And this is the portion of Broadway south of Blue Heron. It extends from the Blue Heron corridor to about 11th Street, as you see. And again, the purple and red hashed areas are downtown zoned areas. So this table here is from the city's comprehensive plan. This is the highest regulating document of the city as it relates to land development codes. This table and the densities and intensities in it cannot be superseded by any regulations or land development codes that we can pass. So this is what's in the comprehensive plan that regulates our development areas. The two future land use districts that are circled in red now are the ones that relate to the downtown core. They are future land use categories: downtown mixed use and downtown general use. They are regulated by floor area ratio as opposed to density of units per acre. And that means most generally that depending on the size parcel you are developing, that regulates the amount of density you can create. So 2.0, as we have down here, means you can develop roughly twice the square footage of your property in the area of square footage. So twice the square footage of the parcel is how much you can develop in your structure that you erect there. So this cannot be superseded even if we make additional height allowances in these zoning districts. The floor area ratio is what regulates those zoning districts. And so moving on to our actual municipal codes, the height is, the height allowance of these areas is shown in these tables. And I just pasted this from our Muni code areas related to this zoning district. So the downtown general area has a maximum height of 3 stories. The second zoning district in this area along the Broadway corridor is the downtown core zoning district, and it allows for additional density in this area. The highest allowed in this area for height is 4 stories, and you are allowed 8 stories if you participate in the public benefit bonus density project. For the Singer Island area, it is 5 to 8 stories through special exception. But again, going back to the comprehensive plan, just because you can build 8 stories doesn't mean that you'll necessarily be able to build the amount or square footage of building that you may want to as a developer to maximize profits. And just a little more detail on the density bonuses public benefit program. Essentially, this says that if you create a public plaza or a public civic space on your property that you develop, you can get additional density. So instead of 4 stories, you can get up to 8 stories. And the fine print down there talks about the calculation methods for determining how much additional square footage you can build in your project based on how big the public space is that you dedicate to the city. So those are the regulators in terms of density that's allowed in this area that we want to attract this additional development, as well as the height regulations related to it. So looking forward into what options we have to change this and make this area more attractive to developers, I've created a table here that lists some of the options there, and I'll quickly go through those options and some of the pros and cons of them. So the easiest and most straightforward is to increase the base zoning. That's, in many opinions, the most transparent and effective way to change the comprehensive plan, and instead of a 2.0 floor area ratio, change it to 3 or 4 or whatever the appetite is for the council. Again, this is easily understood and probably the most clear method. Cons, there are fewer public benefit opportunities because you are giving developers this additional density by right. Another option is to create an overlay district. They are just as effective as amending the base zoning code, and they do result in higher standards. So often when there's an overlay district, the developer has a higher bar to cross before that project can be approved, but based on the codes and council. The cons related to this is it can be less appealing to developers because they know that this is a higher area or a higher buy-in rate for developing in an area that is subject to overlay districts. So it can be have a dissuasive effect for developers, and it could potentially push developers into closer areas or just beyond the borders of those areas. Density bonus programs, similar to the public benefit program that I just described, this is an opportunity for us to say that beyond the base zoning district, you are allowed additional density if you give some type of public benefit with your project, be it a public space or a corridor improvement or the construction or investment of public art. But those types of density bonuses allows the city to get additional things that are needed for quality of life for its citizens from the developers when they request that additional height for their project. Cons to density bonus programs that they can be complicated. They create a lot of additional staff work to operate and manage these programs. For example, some art in public places programs require their own board and staff members to run them once they get to a certain scale in terms of being robust. Although there are clear public benefits to it, it does create additional work on staff to operate these programs. And they can potentially be less appealing to developers because of the higher bar to enter into the community when they are required to participate in those programs to get the needed bonus density in their project. And then there are options for temporary incentives, something such as a density bonus holiday, so to speak, whereas during a certain period of time, additional density allowances are allowed if you develop and get permits and construct a project within a certain time period, say 3 to 4 years. And this prevents properties from turning over to developers that are looking to just sit on it and flip it to the next developer for a higher profit. But those persons are only allowed to participate in the higher densities if they act in a short period of time. So again, there are several different options, and all of these have examples and precedents in the area, and their levels of success vary in different circumstances. And I think it comes down to picking what makes the most sense for Riviera Beach. What we have currently in our regulations allows the mixed use and the form-based code to determine the structure and form of buildings that we want to see in a walkable mixed-use community. However, they have not yielded the results in terms of development because the density is not there for them to get a return on their money. So it is clear that the additional intensities are needed, and we have examples, a great example in front of us from the town of Lake Park. But again, until we allow the densities to increase, starting with our comprehensive plan, we won't see that desired development take place, although the base zoning district creates somewhat of a foundation for this type of community. And I think that wraps up my section.
The efforts described for our proposed process to move the Riviera Beach's vision forward, as you can see by this diagram, the visions of both Lake Park community and the one that Riviera Beach is trying to achieve, there's very close proximity of their targeted redevelopment zone and then ours, which is in the green below. So as a component of developing our new vision, we will look closely at the plans and the process that Lake Park went through. And again, I'd like to thank them for coming tonight and presenting their plan, which has now been approved and implemented as we seek to do that over the next year. The redevelopment of key sites along our corridor, we have a few really great opportunities that I'll just quickly touch on. The city and the CRA have been able to acquire several properties in the corridor, and the redevelopment of these sites will allow us to implement the new vision once the board has finally approved it. Obviously, we have to go through a process, but this is the particular site. This is the old City Hall site. This particular picture happened to be taken when it was being used temporarily, but it's now back to a greenfield site ready for development. It's about 2.4 acres, and it's development ready. And when we did the original mixed-use zoning for the area, we did look at how can we develop this site. And this concept shows how it could be developed under our existing mixed-use zoning. But you can see in this concept, we were provided enhanced public space along the street, both along Avenue E and along Broadway, to try and create a pedestrian-friendly environment on both of those streets. And this particular proposal that we developed just to try and test the code and what we might be able to do at the site, we implemented street trees and connected the plazas to the street. And the build out of these sites will really enables us to generate a lot more tax revenue. And if we can increase the density, and I know it's hard to see on the far right of this, in order to maximize this site, we really had to build on all of it, so the public plazas are not as large as they could be. And one of the benefits, of course, in providing bonuses or opportunities to go higher or more density is you can get more amenities, and you can also create more open public space because you're trading it for the ability to go higher. And the CRA has acquired the property on the corner of Broadway and Blue Heron. That's the old bank building. And this is a fairly dense concept, but I wanted to put it up just to get the board thinking about the future redevelopment of this site. This particular scale of this type of development, of course, would require a significant increase in density and height from our current zoning, but it's the type of development that would generate the kind of revenue and the kind of bring the number of residents we need to the corridor, which will really help to attract more retail and office and fill up some of our vacant space, as well as the new space we envision in the bottom of some of these mixed use, on the ground floor of some of these mixed use properties. The final two sites that we have, and the sites are spread out along the Broadway corridor, which is another opportunity that when we create the public-private partnerships to develop them, we can help control how they turn out and really implement the vision that the board finalizes at the end of this year. One of the sites, the one on the left, is the property it's owned by the city, and it's along Avenue E and 19th Street. And that, combined with the Miami sub-site, which we're in the process of acquiring, creates a redevelopment block of over 2 acres. And by joining those two properties together, we're able to create a substantial parcel that we can create a larger scale development on. The property on the right is the city-owned site, which is just south of Silver Beach Road, and it's along Broadway, adjacent to McDonald's. It's on the west side of the road, and this is another mixed-use site. Now, this site's currently limited to 3 stories, so it's one we're going to have to carefully look at, and the surrounding properties as we envision what kind of heights we'd like at the north end of Broadway, and particularly adjacent to Lake Park, as we'd like to achieve some development continuity as they've increased their heights quite a bit in that area, which is very close. And of course, both of these sites connect all the way through from Broadway to Avenue E, which is, of course, a great opportunity for us when we redevelop them, not only to address Broadway, but also to address the streetscape of Avenue E and contribute to redevelopment of both of those roadways.
So when we talk about the opportunities that are ahead of us, obviously looking to stimulate the economy, increase the tax base, but really to address a new development vision for the city of Riviera Beach. We believe that if we look at some of the items that were contained in staff's presentation, that we can see millions of dollars worth of new ad valorem revenue, but also huge opportunities to create wealth and to create a sense of place, a destination, similar to some of the other communities that are adjacent to us. Some of the challenges that you heard from staff is predicated on some of the policies that have been in place to really look to preserve or to impede private sector growth and development. And we have not seen those activities and those policies come to fruition to come forward with even the minimal development that was allowed for. In conversations that we've had at the staff level, along with developers, there is interest in our community, but the densities and intensities don't make it economically feasible for the type of development that needs to occur to facilitate something that the community can be proud of and something that accomplishes what we believe is the collective vision of the board. We know that there's new business opportunities that would come from economic development. We know that new businesses would be created. We know that construction jobs are great paying jobs, and to allow for growth in our community where the community participates in the opportunities both on the public and private sector side. As communicated, there is multiple municipal projects that are going to have to come to fruition in the next 2 to 5 years because our buildings are at the end of their useful life. And so we believe that we have amassed a number of properties and continue to look at properties within the corridor that make sense for us to acquire. We will be bringing an item to the board for consideration to look at some of the properties that the city of Riviera Beach owns, as well as the properties that the CRA has, to look to trade some of those properties, to look to address some infill development as it relates to the residential opportunities, but also to assemble some of those parcels under one ownership so we can look at public-private partnerships, or we can serve as the master developer and set the tone for the development that we want to see occur within our community. We know that there's multiple challenges that lie ahead, but staff is dead set and locked in with the leadership on this board to be able to deliver on the items that were contained in the presentation to effectively get us to the point that allows for noticeable, sizable, and responsible economic development to occur in our community. And so, Madam Chair and our friends from the town of Lake Park, we appreciate the opportunity to share with you the vision for Riviera Beach, some of the challenges that we have ahead, but we know that under the leadership of this board and the commitment from staff, that we can bring to bear all the resources to see the economic development that we can be proud of. And we only get one opportunity to do this, and we're excited about the possibilities because there is a lot of interest in doing business in the city of Riviera Beach. And Madam Chair, that concludes the presentation that staff has put together.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. We do have public comment on the agenda, and I believe we have 2 public comment cards. 3. Madam Clerk?
Aman Israel, followed by Dolores Williams and Bessie Brown.
I believe our public is across the hall, so it might take a second for them to get over here. You're recognized.
Madam Chair, before we do that, I want to ask a question of Ms. Tomaso, and this was the very last slide she spoke to in the very last bullet point. It went so quick I couldn't even formulate my question. But Ms. Tomaso, your last slide about present day, the very last bullet point, you spoke of the public-private P3 partnership for marina redevelopment. Can you offer some information on how that works and did work over on your end, because we're undertaking something very similar here with our marina redevelopment and how that P3 works?
Certainly. We are in the initial stages of working with the consultant. They were recently engaged by the town. They are on a 9-month timeline. The very first task, which has since been completed, was for them to perform a comprehensive site analysis of the marina area, because of course that is the area where we're looking to, do a P3. So that very first task has since been completed. They are now working on their second task, which is the creation of an offering document to offer the development community. We have 5 total tasks in their scope of services, and we can certainly share that document with Riviera Beach because it does outline the various steps that the consultant is required to undertake. The final step, which we are hopeful will be successful, will be for us to have a developer online that we can work with through a public-private partnership agreement, but we don't yet have that public-private partnership agreement drafted or formalized in any way at this time.
Thank you. Follow up.
Okay.
So the consultant is someone that is apart from your city, and they're specializing in only doing the analysis of the comprehensive site.
I'm sorry, I don't think I quite understood the full question. The consultant is hired by the town, and they're tasked with not only the analysis, but also working on an offering document and working through the proposals that we receive through the public-private partnership process to then hopefully select a developer that the town can work with under the terms and conditions that have yet to be developed as for that public-private partnership agreement.
Follow up. So in theory, you retain the consultant to facilitate the proposal process to then get back what those responsive proposals were?
They are engaged to facilitate the public-private partnership process, which is different than our normal purchasing procedure request for proposal process per the state statute. So they are, they have a certain expertise level in public-private partnership delivery and agreements, and so we've engaged them to work with the town through that process.
Thank you. Mr. Manager Mr. Manager, can we be provided with, I guess, the footprint or the footwork that you've done on that? Because I'm really interested to see how that works. Not too much of the trade secret stuff, but you know how you engaged him and what that scope looks like.
Well, we actually, just to answer that question, we did put together a request for proposal. We did hire this consultant through that process. It was strongly recommended that if we are going to engage in a public-private partnership, we needed to hire someone who had the up-to-date knowledge and expertise in public-private partnership projects throughout the state of Florida. And there was a recent amendment to the public-private partnership, which was initiated in 2014. It was amended with a committee that was put together to allow for a streamlined process for public-private partnerships so that you could easily engage the private sector in the public arena to basically go through that process. So we can provide you with the request for proposal, the information that we have, the analysis of the public-private partnership legislation, and we can give that to you folks so you can take a look at it.
Okay, thank you. I would like that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Amon.
Good evening to our CRA staff, and welcome Lake Park. Y'all are handsome and beautiful group also. Almost look good as ours, but it's a pleasure to see you all. It's really a great thing for the two cities to come together to do some wonderful work that's going to benefit both cities. Fortunately, I've talked to quite a few people in your city, and they are definitely looking forward to the development. And of course, our city, Riviera Beach, we're looking forward to the development also. So I'm looking for some great things. I'm looking forward to the skyscraper that you're in the process of building. I heard quite a bit of your residents is excited about it, and I'm excited being an adjacent city also. And to our Riviera Beach staff, I'm looking forward to our wonderful buildings also. We just can't let Lake Park beat us out now. Go Riviera Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Dolores Williams.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do you have a timer running?
I do.
Thank you. Can you put it on the screen, or do we not have that capacity?
I have it on my phone.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just going forward, or maybe during the next meeting, will we have access to put the time on the screen? Because the people who are speaking really need to know what the time is so that they don't go over.
We will.
Ms. Williams, could you either, if you don't mind taking your mask off, just for purposes of, thank you. It might be easier to hear you. It's hard to hear you. Thank you.
I greeted all of you, and I'm happy for the development, for the main corridor, for all of us. But my thing is, you're stopping at Avenue E, right? what's going to happen over Avenue F and all the rest that's still on the east side. I want to know when y'all going to do rezoning for the west side. I live on the west side. And I'll be glad. I'm going to be jumping up there and I'll be shocked when I see y'all doing stuff on the west side. And Mr. Evan, you, the CRA director and the city manager, the last time we talked, you told me you had 2 things you want to do for the west side. I haven't heard you tell me or show me. I want you to let me know what you're going to do. That's me. I live on the west side. I've asked for stuff. You can't get none. You do bits and pieces or something over on the west side. I'm glad they coming in and develop the Broadway. You had a big thing about Blue Heron and Broadway, y'all main corridor. I'm a main corridor too over on the west side. So we want to see development over there also. Blue Heron, the main corridor. And I'm very still offended by Old Dixie with Obama on the here. If you go up in North Palm Beach Garden and stop right there at 10th Avenue, I want y'all to see how they develop the railroad. Flowers cut, not a pile of railroad ties all standing, the weeds growing off through them. I want Obama street to look good too. Just like you developing and taking in Lake Park, why don't you get and take a development? I saw you had an improvement on the railroad tracks on Blue Heron. I don't know how did y'all go about it, but did y'all ask them to try to build an emergency bridge over for the fire department, for the paramedics to come over if somebody needed? You're gonna do that when somebody in your family, and they tell you at the hospital, if we just could have had 3 more minutes or 1 minute, we could have saved their life. They developed these big old chain boxes right there on Blue Heron in the railroad crossing, and they sitting over across the railroad track. I want to know what you're going to do on the west side. I'm happy for Broadway. I'm happy for all the developers that's coming in. I am still going to get up here, and I want to see more stuff done for the west side. You're doing stuff over here. You still haven't finished Monroe Heights. What you going to do about Monroe Heights? We want the west side developed. I'm happy, happy, happy for everybody. Everybody's participating in this here. But Ms. Williams is going to still get up here and go for the west side. Keep doing what you're doing for the east side. But let's make it full. Mr. Evans, I asked you about how the CRA work. I asked Mr. Lawson.
Thank you,
They
Ms.
told me
Williams.
my time is up.
Yes, it's up. Thank you
Get
very
out
much.
of here.
Thank you.
Jeez.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Bessie Brown.
Good evening, Bessie Brown, Riviera Beach. I think this was a good session, but I think it should have been, the public should have been notified more about this. And I actually came over to the CRA yesterday for copies of the backup, and none of this was even in the package. Now, add on some of this stuff in here, you only had one meeting. I think you just need to be very, very proactive in getting the public's input, because the public is not being addressed in this city. Because I came over, got 2 copies of the agenda, and it says 6 o'clock. Then tonight I come in here, and it says from 6 to 8. Now how is that? As far as transparency and being fair to the public. You just need to do better. And you had one meeting on the properties on E Avenue, and we never heard from you since. So if you're going to do this thing, I think Lake Park did a very good presentation, because they said they kept dealing with their public and everything like that. And we need to know. We just need to know, and then you may get better cooperation.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Is that the end of public comment, Madam Clerk?
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair and members of the board and our guests from the town of Lake Park, this is an opportunity for you all to have conversations with your peers in our adjacent city to talk about some of the items that were contained in the presentation, or ask any additional comments of staff, or provide any thoughts and remarks. And then at that, that would conclude. We'll have closing remarks from the elected officials, and then that would conclude our meeting. But this is an opportunity for both elected bodies to have a conversation amongst themselves.
Thank you. Ms. Glass-Castro, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You had asked our staff about the incentives we were able to provide. In my opinion, one of our biggest incentives was public support. Through this whole visioning effort, through creating the logo, making it a campaign, making it something special, it wasn't just a rezoning effort. We involved the entire community, not just those who are in the study area. We had so many workshops, got meeting to death, but so many workshops that we broke into small table type group discussions, so that everyone had input, everyone had a voice. And I think that helped give them a sense of ownership in the vision. So they may not actually live along Federal Highway, but they had a role in helping us shape the vision for that corridor. They helped us decide where density is appropriate and where maybe it's not appropriate, where 18 stories would be acceptable, but in other areas only 2 stories. We had to overcome some fears. Residents thought that we were going to take their property and redevelop it. So when we sat down in the small groups, we had to kind of overcome those fears, explain, if you're happy with your block, with your neighbors, you don't have to sell. But what do you want across the street from you if the block across the street all sells to a developer? What kind of development pattern do you want to see next to you? And so by overcoming just that kind of defensive front they had at first, that they're happy with their property, they love their property, they're never going to sell, getting them to open up and say, okay, you have yours, but what do you want across the street if it were to redevelop? And get them involved in the input and provide input that way. Federal Highway is not part of our CRA. Our CRA is along Park Avenue and 10th Street. So we don't have the same redevelopment tools that you guys can take advantage of. We don't have any money. As John explained, just our ad valorem tax base brings in so little, it doesn't even cover our cost of police and fire services. We have to make up revenues elsewhere. So I think Riviera Beach has the benefit of the different economic development tools that the CRA brings. By the CRA owning parcels, that gives you a huge benefit to enter into public-private partnerships and have those CRA-owned parcels be kind of the stimulus for attracting interest in other areas. And like us, you have the waterfront. The developers will want to build up so they can take advantage of the water views. You know, I think you guys, really, both of us, it's our time. Delray, Lake Worth, West Palm, they've all redeveloped. Jupiter, North Palm, they're developed. We're what's left. They're going to come to us. We have to provide them the mechanism to make it attractive for them to redevelop, to be flexible, but most of all, I think, to have public support. So, you know, get your residents involved, your property owners involved. That would be my advice.
Thank you. Mayor O'Rourke.
First of all, thank you for having us here tonight. This has been a very interesting and hopefully productive meeting for both municipalities. I want to touch on some of the things that we got from the development project that we're calling Nautilus 220. I heard someone talk about the parking, and parking is a problem. Where the new urban approach to development is that we bring the storefronts closer to the road. It's a more appealing approach, but you have to put parking still, and in somewhere you have to get parking. So one of the benefits we had, and again, our town manager gave the commission credit. I'd like to throw it back on them. They did a fantastic job in putting this all together. We worked as a team, and that was part of what made this successful. So I thank our staff for what they did. But one of the things I want to talk about was we have three important parts that were public that in speaking to the public, these were points that we were able to tell them about that made this an attractive project for them. The first is, of course, that our revenue would increase by $1.7 million. Now, for a town that has a budget of, I call it 8.2 million because I include the police and fire in there. To increase that budget by $1.7 million, that's an incredible number. And when the town residents started understanding that, they started going, well, why haven't we done this sooner, is the response we would get. We also had, and Nadia pointed this out, and she deserves a lot of credit for this because she helped put this together. We had the public improvement funds. We now have funds that will be coming into our town of $1.8 million. This is separate from the annual 1.7 increase in our budget. So now we're talking almost well over $3 million increase in 1 year. These are incredible numbers for us. We were 7 years ago when I got on this commission, our town had a discretionary, I'll call it discretionary spending of $20,000. Now we have a safe fund of well over $1 million at this time. So, and then the third thing that was the public benefit to this program was that the parking, and I started talking about that earlier. We gave incentives for more height, but we also had them build in the Nautilus project a public parking. It's not simply parking for their building. It's public parking that we didn't pay a dime for. So I don't know what the numbers are on building 5-story parking lots, but I'm sure it's a pretty good number, and these are the benefits we got from this program in designing the ordinance and the way it was set up. So I just wanted to point that out so that you understood those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, we do, if we do have time, we have closing remarks by our elected officials. Do you have anything to say, Mr. McCoy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Town of Lake Park, and always good to see you. I didn't see Commissioner Machad before, so good to see you, and thank you so much for joining us in this very fruitful and productive meeting. Thank you again.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson.
Thank you for inviting us. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor, commissioners, managers, thank you. This was just that boost we needed just to continue to push us and work forward and move forward as a city in conjunction with our surrounding municipalities. Our goal is to try to do this annually because essentially we want to see this progress that you guys are about to put these shovels in the grounds with. So some of the things that I want to bring back to my colleagues that I learned today was really focusing on creating densities and intensities on that land density plan, but also making sure that the public is truly involved in every step that we take. Every position that they have they're the stakeholders, so they're the ones that want to make those decisions of what development happens. So we're going to make sure that that is the number one goal. I want to actually see what the procurement process was for bringing in our RMA, so that we could look to possibly piggyback through our CRA and possibly bring them in and expedite that process. It took you guys about 2 to 3 years to get done, and see if we can have that done within that 6 to 12 month period that we're looking to do. The public support and investing into infrastructure, the soil, the pump stations, the flooding on your roads, addressing that problem that you guys saw and really allowing for developers to see that you were investing into your infrastructure in the community. So thank you. This was just exactly that shot that we needed to continue to push us a little bit forward. So thank you guys for coming.
Our pleasure.
Commissioner Miller Anderson.
Good evening, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you as well to all of you that participated today. I think my colleagues have basically summed it up. We're trying to make sure that we're able to move our city forward and provide, shops and residences where they could be very proud of their city. And it's been a long time coming. I know we've talked about it for a while in trying to revitalize Broadway. But I believe that we're very close to making this happen. Just hearing what you all did will provide us a lot of groundwork that we know we need to do now. And I'm sure our people already know what we need to do, but just hearing what you did and you've already gone through it is very helpful. And I'd just like to thank you all again for coming out. This was very informative. And I do want to make sure that everyone knows we always involve our residents when we have something we do it all the time, so I can't even say if it's a big project or not. We always involve our residents, either with charrettes, interactive sessions, various meetings. So hopefully people understand that we would never move forward on something without involving the public. And so thank you all so much again.
Thank you. Commissioner Lanier, do you have any comments?
No, I'd just like to say that we do welcome the city of the town of Lake Park for being here, and especially as Commissioner Miller Anderson has stated, we are very astute to the fact that we need to inform our residents, and not only inform them, but to actively engage them in working with us to move our projects forward. But I would just really like to extend the thanks from the council and you guys being here, and we look forward to a fruitful relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to echo my colleagues' sentiments of thanks and appreciation for your spending the time with us this evening, and also echo what Commissioner Miller Anderson said about our involving the public. We had many, many, many public meetings, for example, on the Avenue East Streetscape project, and we try to get as many people involved as possible, but we will take cues from you and advice from you as well to how to do it even better. I do want to take this opportunity to let you know that we, as part of our Workforce Development Task Force, have been offering Palm Beach State College courses right here in Riviera Beach at our own Public Works building. And because we are good neighbors, and because our boundaries are so permeable, and so many people who live sometimes in Lake Park, sometimes in Riviera Beach, I was discussing earlier this evening with Mr. Evans the fact that we would want to set up an interlocal agreement with Lake Park to welcome your residents to take part in some of those courses. The first one that we offered was a business specialist CCC, 12 credits, and now we're offering that one again, as well as one on logistics and transportation, which is an 18-credit CCC. one of the great outcomes is that the first cohort of students are now all going on to get their associate's degree from Palm Beach State College. So there's plenty of room in the classes, especially now that they're virtual. And I look forward to the day when we can have that interlocal agreement so that Lake Park residents can take part in those college courses. Thank you again so much for being with us this evening. This meeting, seeing no further business, is adjourned.